gotten up to pee 3 times by then.
I have a sickness.
On average, probably.
Robert, can you hear me okay? Can you all hear this okay? Good morning. We'll get started here in just a minute. Thank you all so much for being here with us on this chilly Thursday morning, day before Halloween. Who's excited?
Oh, yeah.
I'm excited.
Like one of the big costumes this year is just the search, right? The search for coaches, the search for presidents, the search for the next big thing. All right, I think we are good to go. Awesome. Well, let's officially begin. And I do want our colleague, Dr. Josh Jackson, I know he's making his way back down here as well, to join us up front. We are really excited about today, y'all. And we're excited for our students, for our school, for our great alums who continue to give back each and every year here at the LSU Manship School of Mass Communication. When our dean, Dean Kim Bissell, who will join us here to say a few words, first came on board a couple years ago, we had these great conversations about, we know there's an interest in sports media, sports communication, and sports research and scholarly work. What can we do to best support our students? And the idea was to bring back a traditional sports summit, which the school had done many years ago, but not regularly and not with any consistency. And the immediate answer was, of course, absolutely. We've got a great alumni base all over the country, from coast to coast, doing amazing things in every digital space, every media platform that there is. So when we started bringing this back a few years ago and saw just how successful the event became with our students, the networking opportunities, we're really excited to continue this great tradition here at the Manship School. So for our first panel this morning, we have great sports media practitioners that we'll introduce in just a second. But I do want to give a special shout out to my colleague. He's just walking on in, Dr. Josh Jackson, everybody. Come on up. Dr. Jackson and I have met just about every week for, I would say, the past year and a half, ever since you've been here, which I appreciate. Josh is one of our Manship alums, too, who spent some time at that university in Tuscaloosa, whatever that university is. But when Dr. Jackson and I wanted to continue the momentum of the Sports Summit last year, coming off the Olympics project as well, we said this is just an opportunity for our school to continue to showcase our awesome alumni and really help our students each and every year.
Thank you, Chad. So good morning, everybody. Thank you all for being here and participating in all of our events. Thank you to all of our great panelists who are here as well. My students have heard me say this a lot. We're building something here. And I cannot tell you what it means to be a Manship alum and see how far we've come, but also know a little bit about where we're headed. To know that some of us spent hours upon hours upon hours in some basements a couple years ago, and now we are here able to reflect on our experiences and give that advice to the next group of great journalists, great PR professionals, great advertising minds. It's exciting. It's encouraging, and I'm elated to see what comes out of days like today, where not only our Manship alum friends get to come back and pour into you guys, but also we are able to watch all of our students grow and engage with these professionals. So excited about today, excited about everything that is coming in our future, and thank you to everyone who has decided to be part of that ride, both willingly and unwillingly.
Thank you, Dr. Jackson. And before we officially get started, please welcome everybody, our Dean of the Manship School of Mass Communication, Dean Kim Bissell.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
Okay, that wasn't too bad. Let's just try one more time. Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
Woo! All right, that's the way to do it. Thank you all so much for being here and for joining us today in the third Sports Summit, third that I've been a part of. It is so exciting, as Professor Sabady and Dr. Jackson mentioned, to kind of know that we've got this history, this tradition with these tremendous alum, and now we're building things, and there's this vision, and we see growth, and there's just so much excitement wrapped up into all of that. When I started here just over 2 years ago, and I got to learn more about the Manship School and our tremendous alum, I couldn't believe it. I mean, we've got rock stars sitting up here at this table. They are in the room with us today, and it just demonstrates I'm going to brag on the school a little bit. It just demonstrates how incredible the Manship School is, because you look at this foundation that you can get. It doesn't matter what the area is, all the different ways that it can grow into these incredible jobs that our alum have right now. So thank you for being a part of this. Thank you for believing in what we're doing in sports communication and sports media. And I hope you have a tremendous day with our wonderful panelists. Thank you guys so much.
Thank you, Dean Bissell. All right, y'all ready to talk some sports, right? Well, here we go. Let me quickly introduce our panelists and our student moderator representing the Manship School. I'll start in the middle. Big round of applause for Jada Ferris, y'all, one of our seniors here at the LSU Manship School from Tampa Bay, Florida, but now kind of calls Baton Rouge home. And Jada, we're excited for you. Thank you for being a part of this, and we appreciate you.
Thank you.
All right, Mr. Alex Restrepo, y'all. He finished up in just a few years ago, 2007. That was a good time. A quirky football coach named Les Miles was running the football program at the time. Mr. Alex Restrepo spent many years working with LSU Athletics and sports communication, took great jobs all over the country, and is currently the senior director of all social media for both the New Orleans Saints and the New Orleans Pelicans. Big round of applause for Mr. Alex Restrepo. One of our younger Rising Star alums who I worked with closely both as a student here at LSU and then at one of the local affiliates before she landed her job a couple years ago upon graduation at WBRZ Channel 2. Keep it with the Manship family. Let's give it up for Bree Andrus, everybody. And now the young fella in the room, the legend, the icon, CBS sports director, and really just mentor to all here at the LSU Manship School, Mr. Mark Grant. We appreciate you. Being in the media is a grind. There's no days off, really, and I think our next guest embodies that the most. I call him the hardest working person in sports media in this industry. It's Mr. Matt Moscona, y'all. Host of After Further Review, award-winning at every level, but you can find his work on every platform. I'm sure you've already recorded a podcast, a blog, and everything else today.
Yes.
Before we've even started.
Actually, yes.
Matt, welcome back. Thank you so much. And who's worked for the Reveille over the years, y'all? Who's had some great times? Dr. Jackson has. Look, she spent many years down in the Reveille basement in Hodges Hall. Catherine Terrell, doing great work as a sports editor, was able to, at a young age, connect with NOLA.com, the Times-Picayune, worked for The Athletic for many years, and now not one but two stints with ESPN covering the New Orleans Saints. It's Catherine Terrell, y'all. All right, thanks again for everybody being here. Miss Jada, I'm going to turn it over to you. Let's have a great conversation, and y'all, we want to make it interactive. We're going to hear from our great professionals and guests, and then we're going to take a lot of y'all's questions as well to make this as informative and interactive as possible. Miss Jada, thank you very much.
Well, good morning, everybody. Thanks so much for coming. Like Professor Sabity said, I'm Jada, and we're just going to get right into it. So all of you are in different parts of your careers. You're in different places, whether Bree, you graduated a few years ago. Mark, you've been doing this for 40 plus years. What still excites you about your job, going in every day, whether it's the little things or the big picture? What's the most exciting thing? I'll start with you, Mark.
I think the thing that really excites me is I work at a very high level. I do shows that millions and millions of people are watching every week when I do an NFL game, when I do college basketball. And I never stop thinking about all the people who are watching what I do, waiting on me to make a camera cut, waiting on me to put a replay on the air and do all those things and tell stories. And so, I get tired of a lot of what it takes to get to what I do is hard. The travel's hard, being in hotels and going out to eat in restaurants and stuff like that. But when I'm sitting in the chair actually directing the game, there's no place I'd rather be. And I just feel very fortunate to do that.
Anyone else?
Sure, yeah. One of the things I love, and I do, my primary job is I do a daily radio show for 3 hours, and I always believe passion drives the medium. So if you're not passionate about what you're talking about, it's hard to be engaged with your audience. But no day is ever like the day before. I may be on air at the same time every day, but every day the news cycle changes and shifts, so it's never a rinse and repeat type situation. So, I mean, every day that I wake up, I walk into studio and I have a blank slate, a clean sheet of paper to sort of craft that day's content, which is, it keeps you on your toes always. I love it.
I was kind of echo what Matt said. I love that my job changes every day. I don't have to go sit at a desk 9 to 5. I go in and you never know what that day's story is going to be. I mean, just look at this week. I don't cover LSU, but there was a huge coaching change at LSU, and that was happening on Sunday while I was at the Saints game covering the Saints. So that was going down. In the last 3 days, I mean, the story has changed over and over again. And, you know, every day is new and exciting. It's a chance to tell people stories. You know, with covering professional football, basically how it works is you go in the locker room 4 days a week, you talk to whoever's around, and sometimes you'll go up to a guy and you'll just be chatting and he'll tell you something really interesting, and then suddenly that's your next feature story. Like, I had a player that wanted to start his own ranch, and he wanted to start a program for underprivileged kids to be able to work with horses. And I was like, that's the next story that I want to do. And there's 53 of those stories. And so I think it's really cool how I have this opportunity and this platform to tell people's stories, whether they're the first-round draft pick or the 53rd man on the roster that is a really unique character. So it's always fun and it's always changing.
Yeah,
I think what I like most about my job is that, I mean, yes, you don't want to be like, you know, biased about your team, but whenever you grow up and like I grew up an LSU fan, I grew up a Saints fan, like that's all I knew. And so to be able to cover these teams, especially right out of school, it's like, I feel like every person in sports media kind of like hopes and dreams about that one day. And I was lucky and blessed enough to be able to do that. And being able to, like the passion, like Matt said, like the passion kind of like drives the work. And I mean, I think that's like a overall consensus is like, if you don't love what you do, especially in this business, like the kind of fire will kind of like fizzle out very quickly. But like everyone else said, like everything's different every day. I mean, from my perspective, I've had 2 college head coaches get fired in a matter of a week. So things have been a little hectic and crazy. But me personally, the type of person I am, I thrive in chaos. So it's kind of made like my life a little bit more exciting.
I think they all nailed it. No, I agree with him. I don't know if I could work in a 9 to 5 where I know exactly what I get every day, and I guess go in the office Monday through Friday. Sure, I'd love to have more weekends, love to have more holidays, but I think they've all kind of hinted at like the love of the unknown, not knowing what we're going to get into, not knowing how the game, not knowing the storyline. And I'm from here, so that's a huge factor. Obviously, grew up a Saints fan, grew up a Hornets, Pelicans fan. But even if I didn't, I've had other jobs at Rutgers or Patriots, and I still had that same passion for wanting to look for stories, create content. And, you know, I think also in this market, or the state kind of, I feel like our beats have a lot of uniqueness about them, unique headlines, like only Louisiana type things. And that things, you know, we saw it this week. And I just feel like that is always part of the enticement, the excitement of covering these teams, covering this market, because it's just I love getting to work every day, and I've done it for now my 16th season, and I don't think the love and passion for the teams, for the job has suffered at all.
Yeah, one of our professors told us, like, journalism, you don't have to work a 9 to 5. If you don't want to work a 9 to 5, this is the business for you. So hearing all of you say that kind of lets me know that we're going in the right direction if you're kind of quirky like I am. But another professor also told me that you have to have 3 kinds of mentors. One who's in those early stages of their career, one who's been doing this for a while, 10 to 15 years, and then somebody who's been doing this for 20 years. Do you guys have a mentor that you think back on that has made a significant impact in your lives?
Yeah, I would say Chessa Boucher. She's a sports reporter at NBC 33 here in Baton Rouge, and technically, you know, that's like a competitor. But like Chad said earlier, I worked at that station while I was in college, and I kind of like leaned on Chessa. She's gonna get mad at me for saying this. She's small, but she's like my big sister, and she's been doing this for a while and just kind of helped me navigate, you know, just finding my way in this business. But she's like me in the sense where like she'll give me tough love. She's not afraid to tell me like that I'm messing up and this is wrong and you need to do it this way. and whatever. And I'm the type of person, I need that to kind of help push me. And I know she does it because she cares. And having someone that's not only a mentor, but truly cares about you and your future and your well-being, that's something that's kind of invaluable and you can't always find everywhere, you know? So being able to know her and to be able to lean on her, you know, whenever I need, for work, for life, for anything, is something that I really cherish.
Yeah, I'll actually, I don't know necessarily specifically the question about having a mentor at different ages. I don't, what I've always found professionally in media, I don't know if you all agree, but I find there's generally two types of people in media. There's people who realize that wherever they got in their career, they had help, and they're willing to pay it forward to help whoever asks. And there's people that view everybody as competition, and they'll step on your face to get where they want to go. I prefer to be the former, not the latter. Like, I mean, I'll give an example of Mark. So I met Mark when I was producing a show in 2003, and he has been so kind and generous and gracious with his time over the years. Like, he's one of the good guys. Like, I don't think y'all realize, like, this man is the director for the Final Four. He directs NFL games. Like, he's a really big deal in this profession, has been for a long time. But if it's the, you know, the Tuesday before the NCAA tournament starts, and I text Mark and I'm like, hey, I would love to get perspective from you on my show about this tournament and all. Of course, he's always willing to do that. I remember a few years ago, there was a gigantic story it was with Colin Kaepernick and taking a knee, and there was a giant question about what do you show? Do you remember this? It was like, what do you put on the air with that? Like, do you show the protests? And Mark is the guy making that decision, like what the people at home are seeing. And so to have that perspective was amazing. So I don't know necessarily that I have a real strong answer about like finding a mentor. I would say it's more find people in the business that are caring and willing to help, because there's so many people that are look at us here this morning. I mean, we're obviously all willing to help. So find those people, gravitate to them, and take advantage of those relationships.
So I was talking about this last night, but 20 years ago, I got into sports because Herb Vincent, who worked here forever, now works at the SEC, gave a very similar talk to this. I didn't know what I wanted to do, but I was walking in the quad and I saw a flyer for Herb Vincent, Associate AD, talking. And I came here and I listened to him, and I still remember things he said in that talk, and that's when I realized I want to get in sports, and I connected with him after. He connected me with Michael Barnett at LSU, still at LSU, and like took off. So I would just say, but also when you find those mentors, stay in touch with them. I'm going to text Herb after this event, but stay in touch with them. And like Matt said, like, look how you can help. There's going to be a time where y'all are sitting up here, or you're in a class, or you're working somewhere. Like, one of the coolest things about my job is when we have the interns and they get a full-time job somewhere else. So our last intern last year just got a full-time job with the Bucks. The other one got a full-time job with the Carolina Hurricanes. Seeing that and knowing that's what I wanted to do when I was a kid at LSU, I wanted a job in the NFL. I wanted to work somewhere. And so seeing the kids that worked for me are now doing what I got to do, that's so rewarding. That's so cool to see, and seeing all you hear. Just remember, how you came up and how you can help and do the same thing that your mentors did for you.
I guess I'm a little similar to Matt. I don't have one mentor, but I take something from everyone I work with. You know, when I started at the Picayune as an intern in 2010, they didn't have any money. So instead of two full-time beat writers, they had a full-time beat writer and me, the unpaid intern. But I loved it because I got so many opportunities. I got to be on the front page of the sports section every week for the whole fall. And Jim Kleinpeter, who was the other beat writer, was so kind to me, and I watched him and I learned. And when I moved to the Saints beat, same thing. I watched how Jeff Duncan navigated relationships. I watched how Mike Triplett asked questions, and I still admire how Triplett asks questions. Or Ross Jackson, who works with Matt, I admire his work ethic. Same thing with Matt. We were talking last night about work ethic, and, I've done, guest host on the radio before because you kind of want to be able to do everything. And Matt's a guy I look at as, that's how you run a radio show. And so I think it's about being willing to sit there and watch and listen and learn, whether you're 20 years old or whether you've been in the business 20 years, because there's always someone that does something better than you that is someone you can watch and learn from.
I think there's real power in networking with other people, Bree was the first person that hired me when she was at Tiger TV and I was at Tiger TV. I met Mark
I was tough
through
on you.
networking. And so I think there's a real like power in talking to people and getting to know people and telling your story to other people so that they can one day pay it forward. Mark, you say all the time that you're one of 16 people who get to direct the NFL every Sunday. What has that taught you about not taking anything for granted and putting your best work out there every week?
Yeah, you know, it's a very small number of people to get to direct the NFL, but that doesn't mean that there's not a very large number of people who want to do it and who can do it, right? And it just kind of motivates me every week to go out there and do the best job I can and make my crew do the best job they can, because at any moment, you know, if we fail, CBS could just say, hey, we're going to go in a different direction. We're going to, you know, you're just not what we're looking for anymore. And so that challenge to always excel and be great is what really, really motivates me every single week.
You all are from Louisiana, and I think that says something about who you guys are as people. But Bree and Catherine, you guys have this added layer of being a woman working in sports. How has the grit of Louisiana been put into who you are as a journalist?
Do you want me to go first? When I first started on the Saints beat, it was my second year at the Picayune. They'd promoted me to the Saints beat, and my boss told me, I was covering Sean Payton, by the way, so it was a little different than covering Kellen Moore. My boss told me, you will ask him the injury questions, and it will be the first question, and I will find out if it's not. So every day, you know, my 23-year-old self trotted out there and asked Sean Payton an injury question, and he was not a fan of me for about a year. But, you know, we, at the NFL Scouting Combine, we talked it out, ended up, you know, being okay. But it was hard because not only was I the youngest one in the room, I'd go in the locker room and I'd be the only woman. And it was hard to stand out like that for so many reasons. But I'm so happy that he did that because it made me tougher. See, now I can kind of stand up to any coach and ask him the tough questions. And because of that, because I know that, you know, I was about to say odd man out, odd women out, I guess. And sometimes you need to go through those things to become tougher. But I love that now when I walk into a locker room, there's, you know, not enough women in sports, but there's so many more women in the locker room that I can commiserate with, and we can share our experiences, because it's definitely gotten better. But for a few years there, it was definitely tough. And, you know, it's kind of crazy to be talking about that, you know, in 2025 versus, you know, in the 1990s or 80s. But, you know, there's always places we can go. And I guess that's not like specifically Louisiana based, but, you know, that's kind of my story.
I think for me, I just have like this crippling like fear of failure. And so sometimes like, you know, I don't think I have the courage to ask those tough questions like Catherine was saying, because I think I have this fear of like, especially as a woman, being wrong, like just like sounding like I don't know what I'm talking about. And, you know, I don't know everything about everything. Like there might be something I don't know what I'm talking about, but I've just been very selective with what I'm going to ask. But I think just growing up in Louisiana, like, I mean, football especially is like ingrained in your bloodstream from the time that you're born. So you kind of just like grow up like knowing what it means. And I think my boss, Michael Cobble, he kind of said it on air one Sunday after Brian Kelly was fired. It's like people care. And if you care about what you do, no matter what your job is, like that's going to make you better. And I think I kind of grew up with that kind of like blue collar mindset, because that's what my parents instilled in me, is just like working really hard and not being afraid to take those risks, even if those risks are scary. I mean, there have been times where I've been the only, you know, woman in a press conference or something like that, but like I don't really like notice it as much. It doesn't really feel any kind of way because everyone around me has been really accepting. Like no one's ever made me feel like I didn't have a place there, didn't have a purpose there. And I think that's a testament to just how far the industry has come in the last, you know, few decades. It's like women are there and it's no different than, you know, if a man is there. I think maybe the margin for error is slimmer as you get higher up on the scale, like where Mark is. Like, I think I have maybe a little bit more room to mess up without the risk of, you know, knowing what's going to happen next. But I mean, at a national scale, it's a lot slimmer. So I think just learning how to be tough and like facing those fears and like trying to work through them is kind of like what I've learned, especially only being 2 years into my career.
Yeah, well, you mentioned Sunday, so I have to ask you guys. I'm going to start with you, Matt. Walk me through what Sunday was like for you, getting that news that Brian Kelly was going
We don't
to
have
be
enough time.
fired, and then
I'm serious,
the rest
we don't.
of you know, the content that you push out afterwards with your radio show, with your social media. Just walk me through that.
Yeah, well, I think it's interesting because whatever path you follow professionally kind of determines how you handle a news story like that. So I've always been, as a talk show host, I've never been someone who breaks news. I've worked very hard to cultivate good relationships with sources to get information, but as a talk show host, I'm a commentator. I'm not necessarily the person that would break news. Well, a year ago, we launched a website, louisianasports.net. I'm the publisher of that site as well. And it's served me and our site to break news now. So that's something I've had to start to transition to do. So, I mean, I got a call about 9:30 in the morning Sunday that Brian Kelly was going to be fired. I was probably one of the first people to know. So very quickly, I got our LSU writer, Hunt Palmer, got him up to speed. But that the day took so many twists and turns, I think is a great lesson in patience, because it's always, you'll hear everybody say it, it's way more important to be right than to be first. Because if you get anything wrong on a story like that, you never walk it back. It'll follow you forever. I mean, they don't fire a coach at LSU very often. And that day was such an evolution because after Brian Kelly had the initial meeting with Scott Woodward and Verge Osbury and Austin Thomas, which was very cordial, by the way. There was no fighting. That's, again, misinformation, bad report. Then Brian Kelly's agent got involved as they were discussing the buyout, and then it became a conversation of his agent, Trace Armstrong, sort of lobbying for them to reconsider. And so then you start to say, okay, well, is there a chance he might actually keep his job? And then there were high-level discussions about the buyout, and then the governor got involved with the Board of Supervisors and select boosters about if they could afford the buyout and how that's all structured. There was a meeting at the governor's mansion at 5 o'clock, which adjourned around 7 p.m., which is when finally at that point I got a call from two people that were in that meeting that told me it's done. They're telling the team at 8, and then the press release is going out right after that. So we had the story written. I'd already recorded a podcast, ready to publish. And so as soon as I was eagerly trying to get off the phone with that person to say, like, publish. And so, I mean, we broke the news, but it was one of those, I looked at my call log, I took 50 phone calls on Sunday. I don't think I've taken 50 phone calls collectively in the entire year. But it's those days don't come very often. But to what everybody's point, like, yeah, my Sunday was ruined. But it's one of those things where if that thing doesn't excite you, then you're in the wrong profession.
I was about to say, Matt, like it's not, you have to be on call all the time. It's a Sunday. It takes over your day. But I'm sure there was a thrill of the knowledge, a thrill of breaking the news, a thrill of, like, you didn't know what you're going to expect. You probably woke up that day, thought there could be a chance, but then 9:30, you realize your entire day's taken over.
I woke up Sunday thinking they were going to fire Joe Sloan and maybe Brad Davis. I thought that was, and maybe Amon Anon, who handled special teams. That's what I thought was going to happen. But the call I got at a little before noon was it's done, like it's over. So, yeah.
When you found out that they were going to pull the trigger and LSU was going to do a release, did you have to wait until the release was done before you made the announcement, or were you able to go right with it?
We were about an hour and a half before the release. So I believe it was like 7:01 is when we published. The team meeting was at 8 to inform the players, and then after that team meeting, they issued the release. So we went back and embedded the release in our original story after it was done, but we were ahead of the release.
And how soon did it get national? Was it your release that got it out in front of the LSU release?
Within about 5 minutes of our report is when you started to see all the national reporters publish theirs. I don't know that any of them had stories written yet, full-on stories written yet. But I don't know necessarily that I care tremendously. I just wanted to make sure we had it right and we were ahead of it. But it's a very different blending of the world of the worlds where you're gone from from basically being a commentator to then trying to be in the breaking news business, which is, I prefer much more just talking about the stories. Like for years, if I would ever get information, there were people on the beat that I would give leads to, because my perspective was always, I just wanted the news out there so I could talk about it. If it wasn't out there, I couldn't talk about it. So I didn't want to break news, but now it serves our company to be on the forefront of that and break news.
I think piggybacking off of that, I think that just kind of shows what Matt went through on Sunday, kind of shows how important relationship building is within just like the people that you work with that are not in media, that are on the other side, the SIDs, the coaches, if you can, like depending on who you're covering, where you're working, that kind of thing, building a good professional relationship with those people, because if Matt didn't have that, he wouldn't have gotten those phone calls on Sunday and he wouldn't have been able to break that news. He would have got it whenever, ESPN published it or, another national source published it. So like, I think that just further enforces that building those relationships and, knowing that you can trust them and they can trust you in a professional way is very important.
I would add to what Bree just said, also building relationships, but also making sure you're doing your part to strengthen that relationship. Don't feel like that person, every time they see Alex's name on the phone, Alex must need something. A story that I always say to my interns is, my second year at the Pelicans, I went up to a player and he looked like annoyed that I was walking up to him. I'm like, what's going on? He's like, man, every time you walk up to me, all you do is need something. And that like struck a chord with me because it was so true. Because I was still relatively new in the business, and every time I walk up, especially high-profile people, you got to think of these people that all they do is get asked stuff, right? Players, coaches, agents, they're bombarded by requests. So see what you can do, particularly if you work for a team or cover a team, like help them out, and if you hear something good news for them or there's a way you can help them, that goes so far in the relationship. And I've learned from that. I'm so glad that player told me that, because it didn't hit me until that moment. But just always remember that these high-profile players, coaches, even media members get requests all the time. So don't think, you don't want them to think that every time they see you, oh, they must need something. Like, make it more of a relationship, make it more of a two-way street, make it to where they appreciate and trust when you reach out to them, that it's not just going to be a request.
I'd also add that as far as source building goes, this is obvious, but you treat everyone with respect. You never know who's going to be a potential source. And the high-level players and coaches, that's great, but your source could be the equipment manager. Your source could be the practice squad guy who knows just as much as the star player, but would be more willing to talk about whatever's going on. So, I just always treat everyone as they could be a source one day, or if they're in media, they could be your boss one day. They could be working with you again. A coach that you covered years ago could end up coming back and being on whatever team you're covering 10 years later. So, everyone could be a potential source.
Yeah, I want to circle back to something Matt said about it's better to be last than first and wrong. And so, how do you guys remain credible, or how do you guys make sure that you're being accurate when anybody can just pick up a phone now and go out and say, oh, well, Brian Kelly's being fired? How do you make sure that what you're saying is the truth, and how do you go about that?
I guess I can start. It depends on the nature of what you're talking about. I do think that the NFL has gotten into this mode where it's okay to just one source stories all the time. And sometimes that's okay, like in minor transactions, that's probably fine. But if it's something big, say a coach firing, you need minimum 2 sources on that, 2 good sources. 3 would be better. And it depends. Someone could tell you the coach is being fired, but what if that person is not in a true position to know? There are many things I have sat on waiting for a second person to tell me what's going on, and I didn't break it. And someone else got to it first, and that's okay because, as y'all are saying, you do not want to be wrong. So if you don't break that story, that's just too bad. But just trust your sources and always make sure that if it's something huge, you have multiple people from different sides telling you things, because sometimes people have agendas, like in terms of when an NFL player signs a contract. If you're talking to just the agent, that agent probably wants it framed in a way that, hey, this person is making $100 million, when in reality he's making $60 million with up to $100 million, and that last year of his contract is not guaranteed. But they want it out a certain way to make it look better. So you just kind of have to be aware of where things are coming from and why someone might be telling you something.
Yeah.
I think this whole thing was a big learning lesson for me as early as last weekend. So if you don't know, Southern University across town, they fired their head coach last Monday, and they had their first game with their interim head coach this week. And there was this rumor of sorts saying that the interim head coach, who was the quarterback's coach at the beginning of the season, he was promoted to being the full-time play caller after week 3. But the head coach at the time allegedly lied about that and still had the offensive coordinator calling the plays and whatnot. And I had someone tell me that, who I know is very well connected within, that space, within that coaching staff. And I mentioned it in my stand-up. And my boss later told me that we didn't air it, and it probably should not be aired. He was like, you can't prove it. And if you can't prove it, we don't need to air it. Like, it's a rumor at best. And, like, you don't know if this guy was in these rooms. And, if he can't prove it, you can't prove it. So don't run with it. And that was a learning lesson for me.
I would say from a team perspective, everyone else on this table, what's the media, like the freedom, I guess, to talk about the news before it's like official. Like for example, for us, Tuesday, Rap Sheet of NFL Network breaks the story like 5 minutes after the QBs were told that Tyler Shuck's going to be the starter. So, but we have to wait as a team, have to wait till coach, front office announce it. But even if you don't break the story, think of how you can approach the story differently. What's another angle I can get? Okay, Matt beat me on this story, but can I track down a player to get their reaction, track down another coach? There's always multiple avenues you can go to cover a story and not just feel defeated or I can't believe I missed it. Or even, like Matt brought up, he was prepping a story for Coach Frying, but waited till it happened. Like, do as much prep as you can. A lot of times you're going to sit on a story that may never run, or a graphic, or a video that just doesn't, it's, the content graveyard, as they say. So, and that's okay, but you just want to be prepared as much. And to all their points, I think we have seen, particularly with Twitter and even Facebook now, where people just kind of run with things. Like, how many of us have gotten a screenshot from Facebook from one of our parents, like, is this true?
The AI-generated pictures.
Like, Alvin Kamara has 6 children that he's sending off to school. And it's like, it's every day. And I just think be very, very careful what you see. And I tell my parents all the time, because they're the ones who send me the screenshots. But just be very careful with what you see on Twitter, what you see with Facebook. And like Catherine brought up a good point. There's a lot of stuff she probably hears, they all hear, but they don't run with it. And I think, unfortunately, now we've gotten to a point where there are people that run with it. There are people that tweet it out, and then it gets picked up by the aggregators, and then it gets on major accounts, and then it brings life to a story that wasn't even true. It was an off-the-record convo, or just maybe even a joke, or one person who didn't even know. But once it gets out there, people will just run with it. So for y'all, just to be more careful of what you see and what you report.
I want to open it up to questions from the floor. Does anyone have any questions? Yeah. We have one over here on the right, or the left, I guess.
Yeah, but Harold Perkins opting up the rest of the season.
Mic check 1, 2. Shout out to Miss Mia Hadaway, y'all.
Can I add just one thing to the last? Just truthfully, like, does anybody remember who broke the story that Brian Kelly was hired at LSU? Because nobody remembers who breaks a story, because it really doesn't matter. Like, it's so much more important to be right than to be first, I'll say that. But the other thing, too, is when you're considering sources of information, like, I always look at it like this. If I deem someone or an outlet credible, like, what does that person have to lose if they're wrong? If this makes sense, like, if someone with an anonymous name on a Twitter account puts something out there and they're wrong, there's no consequence. If Kat's wrong, that's a really big deal, right? If I'm wrong, that's a big, like, I would say, if someone pays their mortgage and supports their kids doing their job, they have way more credibility in what they're doing than
Someone right out in their mom's basement.
Yes.
Posting stuff.
So the way to boil it down is say consider the source, but it's true. Like, just because someone put it on Twitter or a message board, like it's annoying sometimes to have to chase rumors to try to validate them, but would always say just, consider the source.
We're also not just representing you,
Yes.
If I'm wrong, it's not, yes, it is that I'm wrong, but it's also that ESPN is wrong, and that's a big deal.
Yeah.
So I always consider, in the context of everything I do, that I represent a very big brand behind me, and I don't want the ESPN to get backlash for something I did that could have been avoided.
I'll open the floor up for questions. First off, I want to say thank you guys. I've been Sports Summit 3 years, been the highlight of my semester every single time I come here. Mark, you've been here for the past 3 years. Matt, you've been here for the past 3 years. Kat, always coming back. It's so great. I have a question for the whole panel, but I want to open it up with a little anecdote from Matt. So, big fan of Whiskey and Wine. On the Contraflow visit on Saturday night after the game, was watching. Big quote and big takeaway was Brian Kelly was not getting fired.
Yeah.
And then the next day, I turn on Pete Thamel's notification because I thought you were wrong. I was so ready to hear the news that Kelly was going to be fired. And then on Tuesday, while I was in class, I was watching Whiskey and Wine again and just hearing your perspectives from the Sunday night. So my question for the panel is, in the ever-changing landscape that sports media and sports always is, whether that be through big changes where Alex, this position might have been an intern's job in 2007 when you graduated, and now it's one of the most coveted jobs throughout sports media. And then for Matt, the difference a day can make between stories, just stories like that, or even small stories like Bree, things could change within a week, a day. So how do you guys handle the ever-changing landscape that sports media is, and what is those challenges that come with that?
I'll start. The biggest challenge for me is balancing and making people aware of what is my opinion and when I'm reporting. It's that is the biggest challenge for me since we launched our website, where we are a news organization as well now, because my job is to give opinions. And so specifically with Brian Kelly, I cannot tell you how many conversations I've had with people that write checks, hire and fire, that have told me unequivocally there was no appetite whatsoever to fire Brian Kelly. I was in Nashville for the Vanderbilt game. The Board of Supervisors was at that game. I'm on the field pregame, board, boosters, even after they lose to Vanderbilt. First time since 1990. I'm having conversations with people like, we're not firing him. We don't have $53 million, and you've lost 2 road games to top 10 teams. Like, that was the sentiment. I'm telling you, what happened Saturday night at and after the game was so dramatic. I'll candidly share this with you. Like, the governor called me this morning. He made a big dust up yesterday. Like, literally, I was walking earlier because I disagreed with what he did yesterday there were some things he wanted to clarify, but we were talking about that as well. And on Sunday, he told me candidly, it was a shock to him, that he wasn't prepared for this. It was a very out of left field type thing that happened that accelerated very dramatically. But you're right. So for me, then my responsibility, the hardest part, is trying to do the best job I can and make people understand very, very unequivocally when I'm giving you my opinion and when I feel like I am telling you news. And there is a difference, but it's so the lines get blurred. It's so hard. I get it. It's hard for the audience to differentiate. So I try to do the best job that I can, but it's a hard thing to do, and it's hard for the audience to comprehend. I'm very mindful of that. So I can't walk back the fact that I said over and over, I didn't think he was getting fired because I don't think he was getting fired. And it was a very dramatic turn that happened Saturday night, Sunday morning.
A kind of different perspective is also just ever changing is to always be willing to adapt and not get stuck in your ways. Like when I started, we had Facebook and Twitter. Now we have Facebook, Twitter, TikTok, Instagram, Threads. What am I forgetting? Snapchat, YouTube. But also in trusting younger voices, other voices. You know, I'm 40 years old. I'm not the demo for TikTok. So I have to trust and listen to my associates, my younger staff, for what is working, why is it working. Now, I still get like say on what we're gonna do, but I trust them and, well, this is gonna work. You know, the example I would bring up is like, I didn't watch 1 second of Love is Blind, but I know that was a very popular show and was taking over TikTok. And we just did a couple of TikToks that were related to it about the team, and it like took over our account and skyrocketed numbers. And just knowing that what is meant for the platform, that's the other point is like, it did well on TikTok, but it probably would have bombed on Facebook. So just knowing what the platform is and being willing to adapt to it, and knowing that it may be different than what you're used to, particularly in social media and media, of how we're covering the teams and the content we're putting out there.
I think dealing with the, you know, ever-changing landscape, like to go with your question, that's just part of the job. You know, like especially in a market or a place that the fan base really does care about the sports that we are covering. It's just like adapting is just inevitable. It's what you're going to have to do if you want to be successful and you want to, you know, survive in the market that you're in. It's really just what's going to happen. I mean, I feel like if you're in an area that, I mean, I can't really think of a school that like football like is not their biggest priority, but like if that football coach gets fired, it might not be as big of a deal and people have to go in on their off days as it is, you know, here, you know. So I think change is inevitable in life, but also especially in the sports business too.
I think it's a daily thing, honestly. Like you have to go into each day being willing to accept that that day could be vastly different from the day before. Like on Sunday's a good example. The week leading up to the Saints game against the Bucs, the narrative had changed about Tyler Shuck and Spencer Rattler. The narrative was starting to lean towards should they start Tyler Shuck, and I said they might not do it right away, but it does seem like they'll do it eventually. And then 5 days later, they start Tyler Shuck, and suddenly that week is all about Tyler Shuck. It's not really even about the Rams, so you don't really write about the Rams. You spend the whole week writing about the quarterbacks, and based on the Rams game, the next week is going to be different. And so, you know, when I go into an NFL season, I think about what the entire season is going to look like. Is the team going to be good? Is the team going to be bad? And if you think the team's going to be bad, then you have to start thinking of ways that you're going to get your audience to engage with this team that is probably going to struggle. And that means, as I was saying earlier, you know, finding that guy on the team that has an interesting story, writing feature stories. You just have to be, you know, you have a plan outlined, and as we know football goes, it usually does not follow our plans, but you know, week to week, day to day, you always have to be able to, you know, try new things and adapt. ESPN just started doing vertical videos. You know, that's new. That's them trying to change the landscape and get into what people are digesting now. You know, a year ago we didn't have vertical videos, so just kind of have to be flexible, I guess.
Do we have any more questions from the audience? Yeah.
Hi, this is a question from Matt. So a little bit about me. I kind of want to get into the sports media, sports podcasting industry. I worked with a podcast over baseball season, got to do my own show twice a week for baseball, which was a great experience, and I absolutely loved it. But thinking about from your perspective, doing a show 5 days a week for 3 hours, that's 15 hours for content a week on top of all the podcasting stuff that you also do. So how doing it 5 days a week, which is that's kind of what I want to do, but my question is, how do you keep each show fresh? How do you schedule out your content for the week so it's fresh and it brings your audience something new each day?
Yeah, I'm allergic to the phrase slow news day, or there's nothing going on, or the dog days of summer. I hate those phrases, because if you utter those phrases into a microphone, you're telling your audience, why should you care? So if you approach every day like it's the biggest news day in the world, you give your audience reasons to care. So sometimes structuring a show is really just about learning how to fragment your content. So you can talk about one story, like on a 3-hour radio show, I never look at it like I'm talking for 3 hours. I have 12 10 to 12 minute talk segments. So my objective every day is, can I find 12 things to talk about for 10 minutes? That gets pretty easy when you start to break it down like that, especially when you're talking about in the fall where you've got LSU and Saints and the SEC and everything else that people are interested in. And then you get great guests, like if I have Kat or Mark on the show or Bree or someone like that. You know, and there are different angles you can take. So like Monday was a one-topic day. The 3 hours, just Brian Kelly. But we talked about how it happened. We talked about why it happened. We talked about the financial ramifications of the buyout. We talked about who might be next. We talked about why Frank Wilson taking over was the right thing. You see what I mean? So could there be opt-outs? What it meant for recruiting? So now that's like one topic, but there's a dozen different branches off that tree that you could turn into and dive deeper. So a lot of it is just coming up with your core idea of what you're going to discuss, and then how many different ways can you elaborate on that topic. And you might be surprised how easy that gets. Like, I'm pretty confident I could talk about this cup for 3 hours if I
There's always a story. If you don't think there's a story, you're not working hard enough. You're not looking for a story. Even Mark covering the game, you're always looking for a story or multiple stories. And like Matt just said, how do you cover that story? Particularly in this state, I feel like there's always something to cover. And if you don't feel like there isn't, just keep looking. Because I never, like with my staff, I never want to hear them say like the things that Matt just said, like I can't think of an idea or can't think of something to do with this game. There's always something. You're just not looking in the right places.
I would never tell my boss I can't think of a story idea.
Oh my God. Don't ever say that.
Don't ever say it out loud. You can figure something out. Sorry.
Well, can I just say one thing? You know, last week I covered the Bengals against the Jets. Wasn't a very good game on paper. The Jets hadn't won a game, and yet somehow the Jets won that game, right? Mm-hmm. And we had to give that. And by the end of by the end of Sunday night, that was the best game on the air of all the games in the NFL that last week, and that was the best game because it came down to the wire. And so sometimes, you know, it just looks like on paper like it's a dog game, and you're just like, oh my God, I got to go. You know, like next week I got to do the Jets again in New York. They're playing Cleveland, right? Oh, no. But somehow that may end up being.
Piss off?
I know, right? Yeah. But somehow that may be the best game of the day. But even if it isn't, even if it's a blowout, you know, we still have a job to do. We still have stories to tell. We still have to make it entertaining for you, the viewer. And I think that that's the charge of all of us up here, is that even when you're dealing with like the Saints who are you know, really struggling right now, you've got to find a way to make the viewers appreciate the game or the you know, the stories that you're doing, the work that you do. And that's the challenge for all of us.
I think being very intentional with everything you do is how you kind of find those underlying stories. It's like a lesson I learned very early on from Miss Cindy Carter, just finding what's going on around you. Like, everyone's focused on the game, or if it's a big win, everyone's focused on the celebration. But what's going on the sidelines over here? You know, like finding those stories, those smaller stories that are around the big picture can help you do your job better. And you can inform people of what they don't already know. You know, like, we know the Saints are 1-7, but like what are they doing maybe off to the side that might help them to their second win of the season? And that's something that the viewer doesn't know from a broad perspective. And I mean, that's a big reason, like, you know, Matt's able to talk for 3 hours a day because he knows so many different people and so many different things, because he's looking at something bigger than just the big picture.
I actually have a question for Mark, because you said something on a panel last week that I think is really good for people to hear. You talk about you making little movies and how you have a couple of seconds to make a mini movie and then you do it all over again. Mm-hmm. So can you talk about the importance of storytelling when you're putting a game on the air? And I also want you to talk about your journey through the Manship School, because I think a lot of students, for them, it's redirection or how they get to where they want to be. I think your story is something that people should hear. Well,
let's just start with the second question. Unlike many of you, I didn't come here to LSU to be a journalist. I started in pre-med at LSU, and I got a report card. My first report card, I made 3 Fs. And I made 3 Fs in all like the doctor stuff, like chemistry, zoology, you know, math. I made 3 Fs. And I didn't know what I wanted to do. I fell in love with somebody that was majoring in broadcast journalism, and I just wanted to be close to her. And so that's how I got into the business. And once I got into that's how I got into the curriculum. And once I got into it, I was really fascinated by what goes on behind the scenes. I never really wanted to be an on-air person or anything like that, but I just loved writing and producing and editing and doing all those things. Got lucky in that, people would come here to cover games, and they would hire students from the journalism school. You go to an LSU game, and you see somebody holding a big microphone or pulling the cable for the camera person, and I did all that kind of stuff, and just was able to take that, started working in local cable. They did city council meetings and school board meetings, but one thing they did that I really enjoyed was they did high school football games live. They did high school football games on a Friday night, and I started working on that crew, and as I continued to work for ESPN and CBS and ABC, I started to see how high-level TV was made. And eventually, when I got my chance to become a producer for the cable company, I could make like the Broadmoor-Tara football game look like LSU against Ole Miss, just because of the mentality. We didn't have all the equipment or anything like that, but they finally had somebody that had seen it from a high level to kind of make it happen, and I knew what it took. And so that's how I got my start in really doing live production. Eventually went to go work for ESPN. I did football for them, Major League Baseball, all that stuff. And then eventually, 28 years ago, I moved over to CBS. So that's how I got to CBS. And I've been there ever since. What was your first question? I'm sorry. Storytelling.
Mini movies.
So yeah. So I remind my crew every single week when I do a game that like when the play is happening, when it's second and 10, the quarterback's back to pass, blah, 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 I am just literally just sitting there watching the play happen, okay? But when the play is over, okay, before the next play, that's when I earn my money. That's when I get the shots of all the different things that it takes. I make a little movie for 30 seconds before the next play. And then another play happens, and then I make another movie. And every single time we do that, it's a different movie every single time. Sometimes it's about the offense, sometimes it's about the defense, sometimes it's about both of them, sometimes it's the crowd, the cheerleader, the owner, the coach, the defensive coordinator, the offensive coordinator. But I got 30 seconds to do it before they play again. And so I really, when the game is over, I think about the movies we made, and I think about, in the third quarter, there was an interception, and we made a movie before when that play was over, and I go right to that. When I watch the game back, I go right to that moment in the game. So sometimes people start at the very beginning and watch the game. I go to what I think is like one of our big movies we made in the game, or 2 or 3 of those, and try to find those. And watch those, because that's what I remember, is making those little bitty movies. I did a game one time in Los Angeles, and they told me before the game that Steven Spielberg was going to come to the game. He was thinking about making a movie, and he needed to have a scene inside the production truck, and he had never been in a production truck for a game. I can't believe Steven's never been in a truck. What's up with you? But so I'm doing the game, and eventually, I'm sitting there and I look at all these different monitors, but behind me, people come in there, and you could just feel I'm working, but you could just feel people behind you. And I turn around, and he's there, and there's like 30 of his people there. He can't come by himself. He's got 30 people. And so doing the game, and eventually we hit halftime, and he comes up to me and he goes, "You're the director, right?" I go, "Yeah." He goes, "I could never do what you do." And I was like, I was thinking about it, and he said, "Yeah, you got to make all these decisions right away." He said, "I can just say, cut, let's do it again. Cut, let's do it again." And my point is that when I make those 30-second movies, I can't say, cut, let's do it again. I just got to make it happen. And I've got a lot of options to choose from. When I direct the Final Four, I have 51 cameras to choose from. When I do the NFL, I've got over 20. And I got to make these decisions on the fly. And hopefully I make a good movie, right? Unlike Steven Spielberg, who could just say, cut, let's do it again. So that's what I try to do. And that's why I try to tell stories for 30 seconds at a time.
Yeah, I think the most important part of that is make it happen, whether that's going to class, whether that's starting at student media, just go out and do it. Thank y'all all for coming. We are out of time. Our panelists, yes, does anyone have a final thought before we wrap things up?
Marry someone in journalism.
I I didn't marry her.
Oh,
No, that's a didn't marry her.
It worked out.
Didn't last.
I would say I think the one thing I would want to stress, and if you take one thing of advice from what here from me today, is anytime you start a job, internship, full-time job, particularly an intern, I should say, look at the areas. Let's say you get on a team. Look at the areas that they're struggling, and how can I help them in those areas? I feel a lot of times it seems like as I get older and the employees get younger, they want to do.
There's a lot of noises happening.
Sorry, that was supposed to be at noon today with the
Brian
flyer.
Kelly just left, guys.
They want to do the really cool gigs. They want to be on the court. They want to be in the field. They want to be in the locker room talking to players. That's all great. Everyone can do that. Look at the things that your department or your team is struggling at and own that. Like we talked about mentors earlier. One of my first boss, the Patriots, told me no task is beneath you, and then work so hard to where they can't afford to lose you. If you can find an area in your department and you can own that, that can be your niche. They'll find a way to keep you, even if there's no job. We have hired people because they built up a portfolio of things they can do for us that didn't exist before, and we made that job a full-time job. And the last thing I would say is don't be discouraged if you don't get the job on the timeline you want. Bree told me last night she got a full-time job right out of college. I didn't get my first full-time job until I was 25 years old. I had a couple internships. I was waiting, and the opportunity fell. It's almost never on your timeline. But if you're passionate and you work really hard, it's going to work out. It will work great. It can make us not be in the time you were hoping for.
I would say fall in love with the grind of working in sports. It's not all about, looking pretty or, being on TV or, whatever. It's about whatever goes on behind the scenes, because that's majority of what you do. It's not all about, the glory that you get for doing what you do. So fall in love with the grind of it and keep that same passion, because that's how you'll be able to sustain your career long term in this business. I don't think anybody that works in sports just absolutely hates sports, because then why are you here? And I feel like that's evident, especially someone that's on air. If you don't enjoy what you're talking about, it's clear to your viewer. So love the grind, work really hard, and never lose that passion.
I would say that for all of you here, you become a professional today here at LSU. Don't wait till you graduate and all of a sudden now you become a professional. Treat the assignments you have now, the projects you have now, the challenges you have now, as if your job depends on it. That's what we do every day. We treat our careers like our what we do today is how we're gonna it's gonna pay the bills next week. If we don't do a great job, we're not gonna do it. And so sometimes I think we get lazy in college, and then we think, okay, we're just going to flip a switch when we get out, and it just doesn't happen that way. And so if you can be great now, you can be great later.
I think Alex and Mark had some great advice. Actually, what Alex is saying is exactly how I got my first job. You find a way to do things that other people can't do. When the Times-Picayune hired me, I'd already been an intern for them. I'd already covered high school football for them. I'd covered women's basketball, LSU football, anything they asked me to do. I said yes, whether I wanted to do it or not. But strangely enough, I could cover horse racing. And they used to have a full-time horse racing writer who also covered minor league baseball. And when they, reorganized, they needed someone who could cover horse racing and football. And so that's how I got my job. I was able to do two jobs at once. So I started out covering minor league baseball, horse racing, and football. And within a year, I was covering the NFL full time. And high school football is where I really learned to be a journalist. It was the hardest thing I ever covered. And I thought I was going to get fired from my freelance job every single week. But I kept doing it because it made me better. And also it allowed the people at the paper to see that I was willing to do whatever I needed to do to get that job. So always say yes, and you never know where that could lead.
All right.
I'll be really quick. Start today. The internet and the phone have changed the world. The gatekeepers are gone. It doesn't matter if your mom is your only viewer. Start a podcast, start a YouTube channel, because as someone who hires as well, I never ask someone for a piece of paper. I say, show me your YouTube channel, show me your Instagram, show me your work. So if you're on whatever apprehension you have, put that aside and just start creating content. Start writing, producing video, audio, whatever it is you want, preferably all of it, but start today.
Well, thank y'all for coming, and thank you guys for being here.
Sure. Big round of applause for all of our panelists, y'all.
And just an announcement, our next panel will start around 10:30 with some great academic scholars in sports media and sports communication. Please come network with our great guest right here. We appreciate y'all's time. And of course, we're going to bring you down to student media.
Nice job, Jay.
Thank you.
Great.
Classes are all coming here today.
It's good to see you. This thing is like.
Good job. It was good seeing you. Hang out, see you again. Talk to a few of the students.